I just realised I forgot to do this last time. Give you a closer look at this lovely picture of Boudica by the Crafty Nihilist, which is now a permanent decoration of my studio area. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV, and welcome to this, the latest episode in my series, UFO Disclosure 2020. This is Perspectives with Stephen Bassett. That's right. I'm very pleased to tell you that later in this programme I'm going to provide you with an interview that I did with Stephen Bassett. Yes, I hope you like it. By the way, it is the same one that's been on Hapanwo Radio, and that's audio only. You probably get a bit more if you see the video as well, so please, you may want to watch both. I don't know, but I'm not going to lie to you and say it's something different, because it's not. But I think it's really interesting, so you might want to hear it twice. So yeah, the year is 2020 still, although there's only there's less than 2 months to go until the end of it. But is it possible we'll have UFO disclosure between now and then? It's hard to know, because of course the world this time last year is very different to the world now. We have the COVID-19 pandemic, which was something unthinkable just 12 months ago. And we also of course have political chaos in the United States, which of course I've been covering in great detail. But you'll be glad to know it's quite nice to get a break from that actually and do something a bit more UFO related. Although if I am going to probably do another video on this, on the election subject, and indeed I've done actually an article on the Hapanwo Voice blog about it as an update. So if you want to get more information on that, you can always go to Hapanwo Voice, to hapanwo-voice.blogspot.co.uk, and read the article I did, which is more up to date than the last video I did on the subject. So it's short, it only takes 2 minutes to read, but there's a bit of an update on there. But before we bring Steve on, I'll just go through some exopolitical news. An alien robot has been spotted at Area 51. Well, not exactly. Area 51, of course, is a top-secret military base in Nevada, USA, and it's really quite it's really interesting that when you have an absence of information, you get a whole load of sometimes nonsense filling the gap, or sometimes other things, and lots of imagination fills the gap. It doesn't mean everything that fills the gap is false, but sometimes things that are false slip in. Now, Express Online published it. It's based on a video by Scott Waring, who sometimes he produces good stuff, other times less so. Now, but the Express Online insist on using the term alien life conspiracy theorist to describe people like me and Scott, of course. And anyone watching this video, or most of you anyway, apart from Steve mumbling and a few others. But it's interesting that it's almost like there's a kind of hypersensitivity regarding Area 51, because of course there's no way to go in there and see what's there. So people tend to peek very carefully through the various informational peepholes, which do give you information about Area 51. For example, Google Earth images. a lot of what's is done with a lot of this sort of flannel associated with Area 51 is based on that, because of course you can see it on Google Earth, and there's some people who literally pore over every pixel of every photo taken there. Now, the alien robot is something that does look like a kind of humanoid robot. There are two of them. They are 55 feet tall and 32 feet tall respectively, so they're very large. They're humanoid shape, but obviously superhuman in size. So when people see that, they think of like the giant robots of science fiction. They have like a block-like shape to them. Now, even though one of them seems to have a rudimentary face, which is just like little bright blotches of light, it looks like eyes and a mouth, I suspect that these are simply crates. They're like boxes or crates arranged in a certain way, which happen to resemble a robot. Unless the staff at Area 51 are taking the mickey out of us by arranging them in a certain shape. This is based on a recent image that's just emerged last year from Google Earth satellites. However, if you go to an older Google Earth image from 2009, you don't see the same shape. Now, Scott Waring believes it's because the robot was laid on its side. I think it's more likely simply it is a case of the fact that it doesn't look like a robot simply because whatever was making the robot shape in 2019 is not there now. Sometimes the skeptics get it right, and pareidolia is a real thing. I just don't believe it explains everything in the way the skeptics claim it does. That's my only gripe with it. But you know, oh yeah, there is a way to corroborate. There's another way to corroborate this, as well as looking at older images. Go to the Dreamland Resort website. This is it's just called dreamlandresort.com, I think, and it's very interesting. Now they're very anti-UFO. They have an FAQ section where people say, oh, there are aliens in Area 51, and they say no, there's no aliens there, no UFOs, that's all a big lie. Okay, now obviously I don't agree with that, but they have some amazing photographs, panoramic images, like photo mosaics, things like that, taken through telephoto lenses of the entire Area 51 establishment, taken from Freedom Ridge or Tickaboo Peak, depending on the age of the image, because of course Area 51 was extended to include, I can't remember if it's Tickaboo Peak or Freedom Ridge, one of those areas. And when you can actually see the location where the robot is meant to be in one of the images, and what you see there, it just looks like, and it's an indiscernible, irregular image or object which doesn't look like a robot at all. So this is an image on the ground, so I don't think it's a robot. But you know, this is encouraging, because what's encouraging about it is the media is now covering it, even the mainstream media, and people's attention is being drawn towards this location. It's ordinary people. It used to be just nutcases like me who are interested in it, but now it seems to be almost like a popular motif now, and it's actually become a cultural phenomenon. Area 51 is a cultural phenomenon now, and more so now than ever. I mean, there are Area 51 themed, not just like computer games, but there's like Area 51 themed, you know, restaurants and pubs and things like that. There's a Las Vegas baseball team called the Las Vegas 51s. The Area 51 appears in various movies, including big blockbusters like Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, which is, I think, the best one of all. Though everyone thinks that's the worst. All the big fans of Indiana Jones thinks that's the cruddy one at the end, which jumps the shark. I actually really like it. I think it's the best one. So that's encouraging, and of course Storm Area 51. It's been a year since Storm Area 51. This is in December. Well, it's over now because it was in September since the last video I made in this series. But they were going to have a follow-up. There was going to be something called Alien Stock, which was going to be in Rachel and the other areas nearby, Rachel and Hilo and these other places. And there was going to be no invasion or trespass of Area 51 at all. It was simply going to be a festival, a gathering, a conference. There'd be speakers, there'd be music played, that people could turn up wearing costumes. It was going to be fun. But of course the COVID-19 pandemic put a stop to it. It seems to be the ultimate spoil sport at the moment, doesn't it? So it's obviously there's no robot at Area 51, but the fact these stories are coming out and they're arranging something. I think my dehumidifier is making too much noise. One moment, I'll switch it off. So just the fact that this has happened, just the fact that people are talking about it, thinking about it, looking towards it, indicates a rise in mass psychological awareness of the base and the issues associated with it. That is UFOs, aliens, exopolitics, crash retrievals, government secrecy over Area 50, over Roswell and other space alien issues. Now, got an update for Project Blue Book. Despite what I said in a previous video, it's still homeless. I mean, there's been a petition launched which easily achieved its 25,000 signatures, one of them was mine, to try and get some network to take up the mantle and produce the third series of Project Blue Book. If you remember from the previous video I did about this subject, the third series is up and ready to go. It's been designed, it's been written, there's a script, there's production design, there's a storyboard. That's 10 episodes all ready to go to roll out. Basically all they need to do now is film them. So pre-production is kind of done now. All we need is some network to say, okay, we'll produce it now that history doesn't want it anymore, and it can be made and it can be shown. And now the fact that it's taken this long is disappointing. Actually, it's a shame. It's probably to do again with bloody COVID-19, isn't it? Yeah, it's probably nothing sinister associated with it. I don't think it's a conspiracy. It is simply because of COVID-19. A lot of studios are now on sort of running short shift and stuff like that. But I do still think one day Series 3 of Project Blue Book will be produced, and I look very much forward to that. And of course you'll hear all about it on her Panwo TV when that happened. This seems to be kind of like this time period, 2020, interestingly, seems to be, and indeed the years surrounding it, appear to be very fertile when it comes to new UFO material, including TV shows, films, things like that. I mean, we've had the phenomenon, we've had Capel Green coming soon, we've got the aerial phenomenon coming very soon as well. That's still apparently that's still in the cards. It's still in the pipeline somewhere, although no one's heard much from it lately. But there's been several others that have all appeared around the same time, which again it indicates we're on a sort of ascendance of the sine wave of interest when it comes to UFOs. Probably because of the 2017 bombshell. I was going to say 2016. It is connected. Funnily enough, I do believe that the 2017 UFO bombshell is connected to the general 2016 effect. I think I've made that point before. Okay, just interesting that the theme of the last video in this series was life on Venus, the possibility of life on Venus, because if you remember, this news story emerged that this chemical called phosphine, a very difficult chemical to synthesize, had appeared on Venus. And this is a chemical that's always associated with life on Earth. And here it was in the atmosphere of Venus. Guess what? Just a couple of weeks later, you'll never guess what story came out. Water on Mars. Believe it or not, water has been found on Mars. Now, it's no secret that H2O water, you know, H2O, the compound exists on Mars. Of course, there's lots of it, massive amount, almost as much as Earth. It exists in the ice caps, and in some underground. There's a few underground ice pockets as well. So there's a large amount of water on Mars. But of course Mars is very cold, and liquid water on the surface couldn't exist for long. It would immediately freeze. So no one ever expected to find liquid water on Mars, so we're told. But of course liquid water is essential for life as we know it, Jim. We need liquid water somewhere for us to have life of the type we're used to. Now, guess what? They found water on Mars, but it's not on the surface, as I said. But it's a subglacial lake. It's actually, now if you remember, I think I've discussed, did I do a video about this? I certainly did some Panwo articles. I wrote some Panwo articles about this. Lake Vostok. Lake Vostok is a large subglacial lake under Antarctica, which has recently been explored, and they found all kinds of strange life down there. Nothing alien, but primitive Earth life, because it's been sealed up for a long time. Now, seems they found something similar under the South Pole, which is the corresponding area, the Antarctic area of Mars. That is the South Pole region of Mars. They found a subglacial lake. They found several, actually. They found a series of them. The largest is 13 miles long, which is the size of Loch Ness. But they found others that are like, it's actually, I think Loch Ness is 22 miles, sorry. Kev Baker, if you're watching, you come from that area, so apologies if I get that wrong. But what's interesting is that if you put them all together, apparently all these different subglacial lakes, they're about the same size as the one at Lake Vostok on Earth. Now, the scientists who discovered this through the Mars Express, they discovered it by scanning the South Polar Cap from orbit, from Mars orbit, the Mars Express. They said that, yeah, these subglacial lakes on Earth can form, so presumably they can form on Mars. They're very often caused by, sometimes by solar radiation being refracted by the ice above. There's a kind of lens effect. Sometimes it's caused by a pressure effect of the ice. The weight of the ice itself can keep some of the water liquid inside, and sometimes it's because of volcanoes. But subglacial lakes are perfectly possible on any planet where there's ice. You can get a subglacial lake. They claim, though, that the temperature is too low where this subglacial lake has been found, which means the water's probably got some chemicals in it, like salt, which keep it liquid. For example, you know, if you mix, you could try this at home actually. If you mix a lot of salt into a glass of water and you put it in the freezer, you put in another glass of plain water from the tap, the water from the tap will freeze long before the water with salt does. Salt is a natural antifreeze. So that could be. So it could be that it's mixed with something like salt to keep it liquid. However, I do wonder if it's coincidental that this happened, that we had this kind of weird succession of revelations. The news about Venus, immediately followed by the news about Mars, literally within about 2 weeks of each other. Is that coincidental, or is this a kind of... is this an agenda? Is this like a drip cascade or drip dip delivery of a series of articles designed to mentally steer us in a certain direction? Now, this has long been theorized that this happens. It's long been theorized that there is this kind of connection between various news articles, in a sense designed to as I say, I think we've been given some kind of cultural or psychological immunization to something that's coming down the line further on, so that when, supposing some more news comes out of a more dramatic variety, we won't completely freak out. And this, in a sense, is preparing us. It's giving us a tolerance. It's like having a little aperitif before you go and get completely pissed up. So yeah, and there's more. Yeah, and this, I think, it may be part of the drip trip as well. More famous people are coming out and saying they believe in aliens. Now, Dr. Sheila Kanani has spoken out about this. Now, she's an astronomer who's become a bit of a pop scientist lately. In fact, she often appears on TV and on the radio and doing various interviews about things to do with space. Now, she works for the Royal Astronomy Society. She's the Educational Outreach and Diversity Officer. She knows a growth industry when she sees one, doesn't she? And she's come out and said she believes there is life out there. She believes that it may even be life in the solar system. She would not commit to saying there's intelligent life nearby. However, she's kind of almost, I think she may be laying the groundwork in her own career, in her own professional life, so that she won't perhaps go the same way the skeptics do, if we suddenly hear UFOs are real. Because I've noticed Michio Kaku's been doing the same thing. Now, in fact, this is breaking news as I go to air, or as I go to recording. I've just literally seen a post by Tony Buckingham, you know, for the guy from EA UFO, just sharing the post about Michio Kaku, saying he thinks we may actually contact aliens before the end of the year. In which case, there'll very, very soon be another video in this series. But I mean, it's a sign of the times that 5 years ago, if he'd said that, he'd be laughed off, wouldn't he? He'd be laughed away from all the science documentaries straight into the novelty programs. But it's like you can say that now and get away with it, which is interesting. You know, even someone like Kaku. Kaku is a kind of he's a pop scientist. He's kind of like Professor Brian Cox without the obnoxious personality. And he he's actually come out and said aliens. He thinks it's possible aliens are real. Now, I think these people, like he heard, and along with Dr. Kanani, I think these people see the writing on the wall. I think they see the writing on the wall, and they want to not get up to, I don't think they'd ever get up to pole position, because that would basically be people like me and Steve Bassett, but they want to get as far up the grid as they can just if something big comes out. And it's really amazing to see these people. Professor Brian Cox himself, of course, will not. Coxie, the Coxer, I think he's too stupid and too arrogant to realise this, which means if disclosure breaks, he'll probably be kicking and screaming on the floor, basically. And I just hope, if that happens, I hope someone's got a bloody camera and they film it. I really do, because I will download it and I'll share it everywhere. For example, I've discussed this in previous videos in this series, and maybe other videos as well, but Sir John Soares, former head of MI6, Helen Sharman, the first British person in space. These people have all come out as believers in, haven't gone as far to say UFOs are real, but they say an alien life, including alien intelligence, is probably real. And Dr. Sharman actually said it's possible it's reached us, it's possible it's here down on Earth with us, which is an incredible thing for someone in her position to say, someone with this historical legacy. And of course the skeptics, I mean, in the skeptic media, they've just been completely quiet about it. I mean, people like Mick West occasionally comment and just say, oh yes, the Tic Tac's a seagull and the gimbal is a 737 airliner. It's interesting, West can even identify exactly what aircraft it is, which is nonsense. I mean, the skeptics, they're like Cox. I mean, they're just in denial. They're just ignoring it. They're doubling down and they're ignoring it. Or at some point they're going to, oh my goodness me, they're going to have the shock of their life. Now, on the subject of the 2017 bombshell, there was an article in the Washington Examiner asking the same question that, like, Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel were debating. Why is it fizzled? Because no one ever expected that to happen. I mean, Steve and I will discuss this in a minute, but he uses the term cross the Rubicon. Now that refers to Caesar crossing the river Rubicon on the way to Rome, which basically means it was a point where he could no longer go back. If Caesar had changed his mind about taking over, he wouldn't have been able to, because it is a kind of commitment. And 2017 was that moment. I do agree with Steve on that. They can't put that revelation back in the bottle. Despite what the Mick West of this world will say, there's never going to be a story that says, oops, we were wrong all along. That was just a seagull. That was just a 737 airliner. Sorry, David Fravor and all the other pilots, they got it wrong. Lou Elizondo got it wrong. All the other witnesses, they got it wrong. It was just a lighthouse. Oh no, sorry, we've done the lighthouse. It was a swamp gas. Oh no, we've done that as well. Was it weather? Have we done weather balloon yet? Oh right, we have. Okay, can anyone think of something else? They can't do that, which means essentially they can only go forward from here. It can either stagnate and nothing will happen, which, well, seems to be happening. Although it seems to be the state we're in now. Although I agree with Bryce Zabel that it is a temporary situation. I don't agree with Richard Dolan, where he says this is kind of a fallback pre-disclosure position. We have crossed the Rubicon, and I think at some point we're going to have to move forward. But this article in the Washington Examiner basically was interesting because it was a criticism of something by someone called Phil Kaur in Wired. Phil Kaur, K-A-U-R, I think that's how you pronounce it, Kaur, who was saying basically it's all nonsense now. Tom DeLonge is a fool. The whole New York Times are going to stop writing about all this. It's going to be exposed as being silly. I don't think so. The author of this article in the Washington Examiner, a guy called Tom Rogan, I don't know if he's any relation to Joe, he was saying, no, this is not. This is still this person called doesn't understand the magnitude of the revelation that has actually happened, and that anything that what we're witnessing essentially is inertia. It's cultural and psychological inertia, and it's to be expected. You can't that kind of thing. What's happened? We've had 70 years of the modern UFO era, in which there's been endless disinformation, endless. What was it? The Twining memo said, official ridicule and denial. This is a policy that ran from 1947 to 2017. You can't undo that policy. That's 70 years of mental seeds being planted in people's heads. All the generations that have come in that time, both before and after, have had that seed put in their head. You can't turn that around in one go. You can. And of course, there's been disinformation within ufology as well. People like Richard Doty, who has confessed, and others who have not confessed, but I think are the equivalent of Richard Doty, are like Nick Pope, praise be upon him, and several others. So again, even within ufology, we have it's been perverted, it's been confusion set in, and so we ufologists ourselves, who now find ourselves in this position of having to essentially play a leadership role, are ourselves not. I don't think we're prepared for it. As a community, some individuals may be, but as a community, we're not prepared for that. And so, man, my fridge is making a noise. Sorry, this is not a studio, and I don't pretend it is. This article, well, the Wired article claims that Tom DeLonge is a bad figurehead. Now, Tom DeLonge, of course, is a rock star, and of course, we all know that he has that comes with an image, a lifestyle of, for example, taking mind-altering substances, mental illness. I mean, these are things associated with the rock star lifestyle. Now, it's true Tom DeLonge has made comments which I think he shouldn't have made. For example, he tried to bring Atlantis into the whole thing to do with the Tic Tac footage, and I mean, I take the idea of Atlantis and ancient civilizations seriously, but there's no reason to connect them with this phenomenon, this UFO phenomenon. There's no reason to connect the two right now. So he shouldn't have said that. But I think Tom DeLonge is a brilliant person to do this sort of thing. I think he's the ideal person because he is sincere. He doesn't have the ego of Dr. Stephen Greer. He doesn't have the sophistication of certain other people. I mean, Richard Dolan, I like the guy, but he clearly has a kind of ivory tower element to himself, which might put a few people off. I mean, I like him, I respect him, I think he talks a lot of good things, but he talks as he's an academic, he talks as an academic historian. Greer, of course, it's about his muscles and things like that, you know, and about, you know, his tight jeans, and again, you can see that. I mean, I recently watched his new video, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, his latest documentary on the subject of Greer, as an aside. Now, I must say, right, if you've watched all of Greer's others, Sirius, and all the others, right, you might, and the recent one, what was the last one called? Unacknowledged. Which Sirius and Unacknowledged are fairly similar. This new one is actually different, and I think I did enjoy it. I thought it was very good. I thought Greer came across as a nicer, more genial guy in it as well, more modest, which is quite something for Greer, you know. But anyway, Tom DeLonge is a very modest character, I think. He's a very sincere character. He runs a bookshop, you know, along with his musical career. He has a bookshop in California, and it's a bookshop with... And the books in it are like just the perfect books for me. Aliens, UFOs, Ancient Mysteries, Government Cover-Ups, it's all there. I expect he's got Roswell Rising and its sequels there as well. I expect he stocks that. I know what the bookshop's like because I know someone who lives close to it who's has gone there. He's actually gone to that bookshop, and he says it's very, very obvious the person who runs that bookshop believes, he's a true believer. We need people who are idealistic. We need people who will put principles before pragmatism to lead this movement. We need people with that phrase, what is it, ruthless idealism. And Tom DeLonge, I think, is that person. I think yeah, maybe he's... Yeah, I'm not saying he's perfect, but who is perfect? So he's kind of, in a sense, he's someone that young people will involve, teenagers and that can look up to, and other people will look at that, and this curtain of laughter that's covered everything, it can be broken down. So we shouldn't give up on that. Right, there's something else now. I'm kind of going back. The next bit of ex-political news is something I want to. It's kind of going back on something I've covered before in a previous video, and that is the film Black Panther, which is a movie that came out last year, and I did a Hapanlo TV roving review of it, if you remember. Everyone was saying, "Oh, you've got to go and see it, Ben. You've got to go and see it. It's loaded with cultural Marxist propaganda. I'd love you to go and take it apart and give it a real scathing takedown." Right? Well, I went to see it, and I ended up. If you remember, I went in there looking for this cultural Marxist propaganda, expecting to find it, and I didn't. I actually saw very little. So then I ended up rather enjoying the film. I thought it was quite good. It's pretty harmless, I think, actually. But the best part of that entire film, and I think I said this at the time, I'm going to come back to it now, that's what I've kind of come along to this postscript. The best part of all is the end, is the postscript. Now there is a postscript to it. Now if you've seen the film, you'll know this. There's like an animated sequence at the end, like an animated credit sequence, a main credit sequence. And some films do this. They have this, then they have a postscript, and they have the main credit roll. And so there's this wonderfully well animated sequence, which is followed by this amazing postscript, which is then followed by the credit roll. And what's annoying is that when I was in the cinema watching, by the time the animated credit sequence started, people just thought, "Oh, that's the end of the movie now," and they just got up to leave. And so then suddenly the postscript starts, and what they do, they're all standing in the aisle or walking or pushing their way across seats. They all stop and bloody look, standing up, and they block my view of the screen. So I'm kind of going like that. It's annoying when people do that. They did it in Bug's Life as well. Do you remember that they have like the bloopers reel at the end of Bug's Life? The animated thing about insects and ants, and I was like, again, the same thing happens. People just stand there, and everyone's sitting there trying to watch the bloody movie, and these people are just standing there going, "Oh look, it's not over yet. There's a bit more to see. Look, come back, come back." Oh God. So this is why I always watch movies to the end. I was sitting, I watched the whole damn thing right to the end. Anyway. What happens is, like, if you remember the film is about a fictional country called Wakanda, which is in Central Africa, and it's very much a closed society. It has a public image of being very much like any other nation within the region, but it's hiding a secret. It has a highly sophisticated, to what Richard Dolan would call a breakaway civilization within it, and it's hidden by some kind of projection over the top of a mountain valley, and the Wakanda, the high-tech civilization, is beneath this projection. So anyone above looking down wouldn't see it. They'd just see a like normal open landscape. You see this happens in Atlas Shrugged, the story by Ayn Rand, and as well, maybe that's where they got the idea. But it's all kept very carefully. I mean, Wakanda is closed. He has very few foreign visitors. It's sort of like it's kind of a bit like North Korea used to be, I suppose, North Korea. But so very few people go in, very few people go out. But within, like I say, within this high-tech inner civilization of Wakanda, they have like anti-gravity and free energy, which they actually got from aliens, because it was actually from I think it was from a meteorite that struck the land many thousands of years ago, and the people discovered like it had some, I can't remember the details, it had some kind of alien technology in it or something like that, but it was basically like it wasn't a UFO, but it was like something in this meteorite allowed them to build this civilization. Funny enough, you know, people have been complaining about this. I think it's what people are moaning about, and I do understand where they're coming from, is that of course it portrays Africa as the most technically advanced continent in the world, which of course it isn't in real life. And I think that's what people meant when they contacted me telling me to go and tear this film a new one. It didn't bother me particularly because, for the reasons I've just said, I didn't really see anything pernicious in the film, or very little. But Michael Tellinger actually has, funnily enough, he's been exploring parts of Africa, and he's found that there are signs of in the distant past, in prehistory, there may well have been some kind of advanced civilization there, rather like Atlantis. But that's a story for another time. But anyway, it is just a story, of course. Would say Wakanda is not real. I know it's not real. I know it's not real. But there was something symbolic about Wakanda in the sense that there is a breakaway civilization which does have access to this technology which the rest of us don't have. Now, it's not in any geographical location, unlike in this story, unlike the story of this film. There's no geographical location where there's a country which has all these secrets in, which is keeping it from the rest of the world. The breakaway civilization is not a country, it's a class. It's a class of people, a kind of elite part of the ruling class. And the locations where this breakaway civilization enjoys the fruits of its ill-gotten labour can be found everywhere, all over the world, in different locations, in different spots, kept from the rest of the public, like Area 51. But anyway, what's great about this postscript is that basically an embassy from Wakanda walks into the United Nations headquarters to make an announcement. And they're led by King T'Challa, who's the leader of Wakanda, who's played by an actor who, I can't remember the name of the actor. Sadly, he died actually. He died a couple of months ago. It was quite a young age. I think he was 43. And they walk in, and they do this announcement in the front of the United Nations. And I'll read everything he says actually, yeah, because it's good. King T'Challa stands up with all his ministers around him, and he says, "For the first time in our history, we will be sharing our knowledge and resources with the outside world. Wakanda will no longer watch from the shadows. We cannot, we must not. We will work to be an example of how we as brothers and sisters on this earth should treat each other. Now, more than ever, the illusions of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges while the foolish build barriers." I don't know if they're having a little bit of a dig at President Trump there and his wall. It wouldn't surprise me. You know, Hollywood is just, it's so incredibly left-wing. "We must find a way to look after each other as if we were one single tribe." And this is kind of a disclosure moment, because what T'Challa is doing is he's essentially, this is the breakaway civilization approaching the rest of the world and says, we're going to declassify everything. So Wakanda is now going to open itself out to the world and allow the rest of the world to use this technology that it's been secreting for its own purposes for decades and centuries. And then, of course, this is an example of some of the things that this annoyed me like it annoyed everyone else. But the response from the United Nations is this: there's this token evil white male. You know what I'm talking about. They're everywhere in Hollywood now. He says, he sort of stands up and he says, "With all due respect, King T'Challa, what can a nation of farmers offer the rest of the world?" And the Wakandan embassy, they all smirk and roll their eyes, and the rest of the people in the room, they make these virtue signalling noises. And then the film ends and we get the credit roll. Apparently there's going to be a sequel to this, to Black Panther, when the COVID-19 pandemic is over. There's a million different things that say that now, with the suffix, when the COVID-19 pandemic is over, when the lockdown finishes, blah blah blah, such and such and such after the lockdown. I mean, there's a million things, whether it's a conference on UFOs, or it's a sporting event, or it's school exams. I mean, everyone's poised for after the lockdown now. So, will the lockdown ever come? Will the end of the lockdown ever come? Ah, that's another thing. But anyway, another person who I think should be maybe commenting on that is Paul Krugman. Now, Paul Krugman is a columnist for the New York Times, the same paper that brought out Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal's articles and all the other things to do with UFOs recently. Now, he said something interesting, because he's an economist. He's actually a Nobel Prize winner in economics. And he said this a long time ago in 2011, but it's sort of coming back to haunt people now, and there's been new articles written about it. But he said, he was referring to the 2008 crash, and the Obama administration's monetary policy to try and get the United States out of it. He was American himself, so he's referring specifically to the United States. And he was very critical of that, and he said, basically, he started talking about fiscal stimulus. Now, this is where the government tries to stimulate the economy directly, either through its monetary policies such as taxes and interest rates and things like that, or by increasing its consumption. So it essentially becomes a consumer of industry, which will then generate capital industry, which will then kickstart the economy out of the recession. Oh, interestingly, economists are much more honest than the rest of the media, because do you remember the term recession? It kept being used. Now, recession simply means a cessation of economic growth. But economists use the word slump. Slump means an actual reduction of economic growth, which is far more honest, because that's what it was. So he basically said that if the Obama administration did this, the crisis, that is the economic crash, would be over with, the slump would be over within 18 months. And he said, perhaps an invasion of space aliens would do the trick. He said that. There was no sort of wink, there was no smirk. He actually just said this. And of course, he's right. If it's rather like a world war as well. You could say the same thing. I mean, he used the analogy of World War II and World War One. If these things happen, then there would be an immediate state of emergency, a global state of emergency. You see this in actual stories, like in alien invasion stories like War of the Worlds, Independence Day, etc., which basically allows the government to get away with authoritarianism it wouldn't otherwise get away with, which includes economic authoritarianism, such as hyper-regulation of the private sector, or things like that. War bonds, great increased borrowing, and things like that. Cancellation of elections, temporary, of course. I mean, I've often said that I've often speculated about this. In fact, I've been debating this with Steve Mumbling in our various videos. But if there are no unfriendly passing aliens who will be kind enough to invade us and so provide this opportunity, would the government fake it? And the answer is yes. And Steve Mumbling thinks no. I think yes. But you know what's ironic is the government seems to have already achieved this using a much less obtrusive and dramatic kind of excuse. No aliens, no global war, no little green men dropping bombs from the sky. Instead, it's a tiny little virus called COVID-19. Because if you look at it, the lockdown has kind of achieved pretty much what a global war, or even possibly an alien invasion, would achieve. It's all been done with a very ordinary and prosaic little thing. Pretext, a virus, a natural virus according to them as well, which is not. So Paul Krugman, who knows? I mean, in a sense, maybe now he's realising this and realising that no aliens required. The government could use recovery from the pandemic as an excuse to do everything it would have done in an alien invasion. But anyway, let's have a look at what more little bits of exopolitical news there are. And so the only extra news I want to add to this particular programme is basically what Steve was talking about, which is the Disclosure Wire. The first broadcast out of Washington, D.C. on all things exopolitical. Yes, Steve Bassett, who has been on so many other people's shows, including mine, is now going to become a content creator himself, which is fantastic. And it's great to welcome him to this community of UFO, exopolitical and alien broadcasters.
So I wish him all the best of luck. It says here, coming soon, developments both political and exopolitical have been underway in Washington, D.C. over the past 3 years. For this reason, Paradigm Research Group Executive Director Stephen Bassett has relocated back to the nation's capital to renew engagement of Congress and the political media. He will stay until disclosure has been achieved. In support of this effort, PRG has leased an office in the National Press Building, oh my goodness me, the home of the National Press Club, of which Bassett is a member. From this office, PRG will launch the first exopolitical video podcast out of Washington, D.C. The podcast will be titled The Disclosure Wire and hosted by Bassett. Guests will be drawn from researchers, activists, witnesses, mainstream journalists and political pundits in the studio or via remote. I hope he'll invite me on, I really do. When the ongoing health crisis and political chaos have settled down, it'll be possible to begin direct lobbying on Capitol Hill with any and all congressional members and staff. As you see, he's put some photographs in to show you what they will look like. See, it's all, as you see, it looks very moved in, doesn't it? But that's the before moment where he moved everything in, and this is the after moment. So check that out. That's the studio. It's good, isn't it? It's pretty good. And that's that picture. You see the picture in the middle, I think, is where he was sitting when he interviewed me. And there you see, and you see some more of it there. Absolutely brilliant. And obviously, Steve has decided to get in on the top floor, so he's done a bit of a people's voice kind of thing by launching his service as in a professional manner with proper studios, proper cameras, everything sort of top notch. He didn't have to do that. He could have just started as I started, indeed as I continue, which is just get yourself a microphone and a camera, mate, set it up in your bedroom, that sort of thing. That works for some people. It works for me. I'm not a quality technical content creator, I admit that, but Steve, I think he wants this to look worthy of the National Press Club, which is fair enough. And of course the National Press Club is where he held the citizen hearing, of which I was so enthusiastic. So hey, can't wait for that to launch soon. So good luck, Steve, and friends and colleagues. Okay, now I've tried to find some source material for what I said earlier about Michio Kaku. Again, this is something I just suddenly discovered just before I was about to record. Now, if you put into the search bar Michio Kaku Aliens 2020, you don't actually come up with any statement Kaku made regarding us definitely making contact with aliens before the end of the year. The closest you get to is this video. There's a video on YouTube called Michio Kaku Will Make Contact with Aliens This Century, AI podcast clips. Now this is actually it says this century, not this year, but it was recorded. Actually, no, it's actually from 2019, so it's from last year. There's no actual thing on this year which goes along with it, but this is by someone called Lex Friedman, no relation to Stanton, I don't think. And he does this interview with, actually it's Friedman, F-R-I-D-M-A-N, but he does this interview here with Kaku. Now what Michio does say is he gives out the usual SETI line, really, where he talks, there's 100 billion stars in every galaxy, 100 billion galaxies in the visible universe. Of course we can't be alone, and that makes sense. I understand that. The problem is that's kind of irrelevant when you consider that we don't have to wait any longer. They're already here. I explained that in my SETI and UFOs video. I've done several different versions of that video I've got on my channel now, and indeed on Tajinder Gill's channel too. There's a very good one on there. So again, there's nothing really groundbreaking about what Kaku said, or any more groundbreaking than things he said already, which I discussed in a previous video about him. Now, one thing he does is he talks about the Kardashev scale, the different types of civilization. The Kardashev scale talks about how there are different kinds of civilization on different levels. Now, the Kardashev scale is something invented by a Russian astronomer called Nikolai Kardashev. And he came up with this in 1964. And it's a method of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement based on the amount of energy they're able to use. So type 1 would be technological civilization close to the level presently attained on Earth, which is with our kind of industry and things like that. A Type 2 civilization is capable of harnessing the energy radiated by its own star with the construction of a Dyson sphere. And this is what everyone was saying Tabby Star was. I was hoping very much that Michio Kaku would mention Tabby Star, and he didn't. Because I think that's a very, very important piece of evidence there. Even though Tabitha Boyadjian herself is now denying this. But this is the construction of a Dyson sphere around the star, a huge structure in space, harnessing the energy of the star. Now, in a sense, you could say we're kind of in Type 2 because we do harness the energy of the sun through solar panels. So does that count? Excuse me. Does that count? A Type 3 civilization is possession of an energy on the scale of its own galaxy. So it's able to harness the luminosity of the entire Milky Way. That's what he said. Now, Kardashev believed that a Type 4 civilization was impossible. You can't get anything more than the harnessing your own galaxy. However, maybe it's possible. Maybe it's actually possible that you can't. It's possible, maybe. What about free energy? See, what about 0-point energy? Now, Nikolai Kardashev was a conventional sort of scientist. He didn't want to... He was a Russian astrophysicist and astronomer. He was a deputy director of the Astro Space Center at the Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow. He just died last year, interestingly. Yeah, so that's very, very interesting. The Ledvedev Physical Institute. Yeah, so he's very much establishment. You can't go talking about free energy very easily if you're in that position. Although maybe more people will in the future. But Michio Kaku, I think he's very groundbreaking. Like he's 10 feet above Professor Brian Cox in every way imaginable. But he's still not taking that final leap forward. The leap that he really needs to, I think, to become a sort of exopolitical, seriously consideration for UFOs. I mean, that's where you have to go a step further, I think. Even like Helen Sharman was saying, that maybe they're here already. She said that. Now, he has to take the same step. He has to address the points I make in my own video entitled SETI and UFOs. But very interesting nonetheless. Obviously, Tony posted this meme. It wasn't a link. But I can't... Unless there is some source article, I'll ask Tony about that. In which case, my goodness, that would be interesting.
And so now, ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, it's time to bring on Stephen Bassett. He's the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group. He's an activist. He's a researcher into all matters exopolitical, and he's a lobbyist. He wants simply a full and frank acknowledge from the authorities in this world that there is an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. And so I'm going to discuss something with him. And we obviously, like, I'll put links in the description box to interviews I've done in the past with Steve, and you can look at those. But in the meantime, we're going to hear all the latest news from everything he has to say. So, hope you enjoy it as much as I did making it.
Hi, Stephen Bassett. Hello, how are you?
I am fine, Ben.
It's good to see you again. It's been a while. In fact, it's been a year and a month since we last spoke, and I must say, you changed your setup a little bit. I like the picture. I've got like a little flying saucer there and a sunset, which is nice, which I think is appropriate for these sort of subjects. And
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, this is the nation's Capitol building here in the United States, where our absolutely stellar Congress has been doing fantastic work, shaping America's future and moving us forward into the 21st century.
Yeah, I recognise it very well. A beautiful building. And
Yeah.
Are you still hard at work lobbying and doing the things you were originally?
Not exactly. The pandemic has limited substantially what I can do, and so I've been kind of biding my time, waiting for the election to resolve, the political situation to move toward resolution, and so I do expect to get extremely active very soon, going through the end of the year and into 2021.
Right. Well, hopefully I do hope this pandemic won't last much longer, because the world has changed considerably. We last spoke. I last interviewed you for Herpanmo TV and radio in October last year. It's now November 2020, and everyone's walking around with masks on. Ironically, some of them make some people look a little bit like aliens. So it's a weird situation we're in now. So I've been working. I mean, I haven't lost my job or anything, but I know people who have, and so there's a lot of fear in the world at the moment, a lot of uncertainty, and we just had this very unusual election that's just been going along as well, which is so. What do you think is going to happen, Steve? What's your priorities in terms of progress at the moment?
I can speak to the disclosure process, and I will. In terms of what's going to happen in general, I certainly it's out of my pay grade. There's going to be huge changes in America next year. There will be changes around the world. The pandemic is not over.
Yeah.
It's not going to be over until there's a worldwide vaccine available. So it's very hard to predict the kind of general status of the affairs of men and women next year. But on disclosure, I can give you some kind of fairly strong assessment.
Because a lot in terms of the UFO. I mean, the UFO, the ET. Pardon me, the ET situation has continued. I mean, a lot has happened. For example, we now have a space force. I mean, what do you think of the space force? What's that all about?
I'm not impressed with the space force. It was, I guess to me, it was a bright shining object, one of many, many such objects that was hung out there by the president to show action. My sense was that the Department of Defense really didn't want it, but they were happy to take the money. They put a few things together, but it's kind of been of a joke, frankly. And the reason is simple. The United States government has had a classified space program forever.
Yeah.
Going back to the formation of NASA. And so they don't need a space force. They have a classified space program, do what they want. The Space Force then essentially brought this idea of the classified national security space work more out into the open, and it shone a light on it, which I don't think they really wanted. So I'm not too concerned that the Space Force is going to evolve into a true sixth branch of the military or whatever that is, and we're going to spend trillions of dollars in order to, quote, defend ourselves in space. However, there is a legitimate concern, national interest about the misuse of space by nations, including us. Satellites are part of the national security structure for many countries, and one could start destroying other people's satellites, and that would be, in a sense, a war in space. But ultimately, it's a hardware, software, tech problem, meaning interfering with those satellites, their function, interfering with communication, hacking them, shooting them down. I don't think is likely. That could lead to a war. So the Space Force is just a giant hammer, and it wasn't needed. So we'll see what happens with that in the next administration. Definitely.
I mean, for example, Carol Rosin said that the weaponization of space, you must stop the weaponization of space. At the 2001 press conference, this is what Werner von Braun told her. And at the same time, I mean, it seems weird because we have Paul Krugman, who's a famous economist. He writes for the New York Times, actually, the same one which Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean have been writing for. And he said, if we discovered that space aliens were planning to attack and we needed a massive build-up to counter the space alien threat, and inflation and budget deficits took secondary place to that, the slump would be over in 18 months. I know he was talking in 2011, but this was just a couple of years before all hell broke loose there's all these declassifications that we talked about in the previous program. So do you think this is likely to happen? Are we going to be told, yes, there are aliens, but they're bad guys?
No, I don't think so.
Good.
You'll find that as you follow the progress of the To the Stars Academy, which launched in October of 2017, and you listen carefully to what they're saying, the key people, and some of the witnesses, there is a message that pops up from time to time, which is very important. the people in the citizen science research effort that's been going on for 7 decades on this have stated this, but now you're starting to hear it from people connected to government or formerly connected to government. And it's a simple statement. We cannot win a war against interstellar extraterrestrials with the advanced technology they have. It's not possible. It's not even worth trying, to be honest with you. Now, we can prepare for open contact with them. We can prepare certainly for disclosure of their presence finally to the world's people. That's fine. But the concept that, oh, well, we're going to have to defend ourselves, I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. We can't win. We will lose. If there was a true war and they wished it so, we would pretty much be out of the war within weeks or days. All the movies you see about this concept are nonsense. Independence Day is nonsense. And the second movie, Independence Day Resurgence, was not only nonsense, it was an awful, awful movie. So that's coming out, and that's appropriate. It's just the way it is. It's reality. The laws of physics are very powerful, and you can't overcome them with political Sturm und Drang. So again, I like the analogy I use is imagine that our elite special forces took on a kindergarten class armed with squirt guns, and you were trying to calculate what are the chances that the kindergarten class would win the encounter.
Yeah.
Well, that's the chances that we have an extraterrestrial presence. And so the space stuff, war and weaponization, to the extent that it is being put forward as a way to spend money to defend against aliens, is a con, a rube, and a fraud, and should be eliminated. To the extent that it's put forward as, well, we have to defend ourselves against other nations, they're going to attack us in space and so forth, then it's just more of the same that we've been going through for thousands of years, which is how can we set up for the next war? How can we create the next war? How can we continue to destroy each other's infrastructure and kill people? So the effort to de-weaponize or not weaponize space has had a modicum of a success. It certainly raised the issue. There are some treaties in place. A full-out de-weaponization or non-weaponization treaty has not happened yet, not at the level that it needs to. So we haven't solved that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I do recommend that if any viewers or listeners, do watch Independence Day. It is an awful film, but it's interesting because...
Well, the first one wasn't too bad. I mean, it was ridiculous in a way, but it wasn't too bad. But the second one, Independence Day Resurgence, oh my God. Again, if you have some background in science, if you are interested in science and you're somewhat well-read, some sci-fi movies are so offensive it's hard to bear them. So that was the case. But again, the fundamental idea was this massive extraterrestrial spaceships with interstellar travel coming here, and we're going to take them down by hacking their computer with an IBM, with an iPad, whatever. This is silliness, but it's not trivial, because it's possible that as we move to disclosure, and we're heading there pretty quickly right now, there will be people in government that will use that as an opportunity to make a name for themselves, get some media, get on TV, and serve some of their supporters, like maybe members of the military intelligence complex, particularly the civilian contractors with, wow, yeah, we really got to defend ourselves. I think we need to appropriate $1 trillion that needs to go to my main supporters in order to build a massive defense force against extraterrestrials. There will be some of that. There will be an attempt at that, I am sure, and I hope, and I think we will be able to thwart that, because it would just be more rank human arrogance, hubris, and stupidity.
Oh, there's no shortage of that. I mean, in the movies, of course, we just mentioned, there's always some kind of deus ex machina which saves the day. In War of the Worlds, it was germs. In Independence Day, they just found a soft spot on the bottom of the spaceship. But of course, people realise that's incredulous.
Well, not everybody does. The average person doesn't know. They view sci-fi as interesting and maybe a projection of the future, but the average citizen, no. The United States has unfortunately not done well in building a scientific and mathematically educated populace. We failed there. We've made some efforts, but didn't work. So we're going to have to go forward with what we have, which is a population which is generally not knowledgeable in math and science, and therefore it's going to struggle with trying to deal with the kinds of issues that are coming forward, and that's just the way it is. But hey, we have the means to hopefully educate people as to the scientific aspect of the ET issue and so forth. There is some interest in many, and there are a lot of programs on TV, particularly in the cable channels, about science and the universe, and all that's great. That's helpful. But again, we've got 7 billion people on this planet, and so any demagogue that wants to sell alien invasion is going to have an audience. And so we need to get disclosure as soon as possible and move to the conveyance of hard information to the world's people, so that to minimize them being bamboozled by whatever turns up in front of their face going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the people's response to whatever happens, I mean, you've talked about this before, the people's response to what happens in the event of a disclosure, or indeed a large alien presence that just appears, will depend on how they've been conditioned. And while we're on the subject of like conditioning and science fiction, what do you think of Project Blue Book, the TV series?
I liked it. It was a theatrical rendition of based on the Project Blue Book and the life of J. Allen Hynek. It took considerable literary license to make it interesting, that's the way it works. Our genre is not any different than any other genre in history. Everybody wants it to be absolutely precisely accurate. No, that's not the way it works. Paul Hynek, who I've had some communication with, the son of one of the sons of Allen Hynek, he was happy with it. He liked it. He enjoyed being involved in it. And if Paul's happy with it, I'm happy with it. I'm sad that it didn't get sent up for a third season. It may come back.
It could be, yeah.
So,
they're working on that.
I'm not sure. History Channel's going through some disruption, but it helped to make it brought the name of J. Allen Hynek to a lot of people who had never heard about him before. It showed him kind of as a hero, a smart guy, and hopefully that people will be drawn to his biography and history and learn about the real Hynek and what he did. He was a very important person in the 20th century who has not gotten the acknowledgement and accolades and credit that he deserves, because he was trying to tell the truth about a subject that the government was determined to say did not exist. Yeah. So, hey, that's a tough gig for anyone. I'm sorry he's still not with us, because the truth is going to come out pretty soon.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating, I find it a fascinating series. I mean, it's probably the best thing since the X-Files. It's this idea that J. Allen Hynek wrote about in his book, about how after working for like more than 20 years on this project, he realized that he was supposed to basically debunk everything, and he wouldn't do it. And the government didn't like that, because they brought the whole Project Blue Book thing was set up to just to make people believe there was nothing ET about the UFOs. And this is portrayed very well in the series, I think. From the very start, you're told, yes, there are real aliens, and yes, there's the Majestic 12 in the very first scene of the first episode.
Yeah.
And then it builds on that. I mean, Hynek teams up with his sidekick, and who's basically handling him. But it all, bit by bit, things come out, and it's really brilliant. I really do hope they get a third series, Steve. I really do.
Yeah, but understand, it was very theatrical. In other words, there's a lot of stuff in the Project Blue Book episodes that is simply not true. It's even melodramatic. And that's a little awkward, because there will people out there that are going to enjoy the show, and they're going to think that that's what happened in Allen Hynek's work, and not exactly. But this is the nature of our times. You get through stuff through television, and it needs to be made entertaining, or people won't pay attention. But there is a history. It's out there, and one can find it. And the truth, I think, is so much more powerful than theatrical renditions. It is ultimately more powerful. So hopefully people will find out about that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, during the last 12 months, along with everything else that's been going on, there's been a series of news stories that have come out in such a way that makes me believe like there's almost like a series of events leading up to something. For example, we were told that it's possible there's life on Venus in the atmosphere. And then they've got this thing called phosphine, which is a very difficult chemical to synthesize. It's literally dependent on life for its presence on Earth. And then apparently water is on Mars. It's a large, very large underground or underneath. It's a subglacial lake, which is enormous. It's about the size of Northern Ireland, and it's beneath the surface of the Mars's ice caps. And and then at the very same time, we've had very, very famous people, very important people, coming out and saying that they believe in aliens. For example, Helen Sharman, who was the first British astronaut, the first British person in space. And amazingly, Sir John Soares. Now, he is the former chief of MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service. And he did an interview with the Sun newspaper saying, oh, yeah, aliens are real. I really do think they are. And I just think to myself, are we being led somewhere, Stephen? Are we being led in a certain direction?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The disclosure movement, which has been going on in one form or fashion now for 70 years, to try to get the end of the truth embargo, the formal acknowledgement of ET presence. It's like a marathon. I used to run them, and if you're not in great shape and you're trying to do a marathon, you get going, and it's not clear you're going to make it. You're going to finish, and then at some point in the race, you realize you've gotten far enough, and you're going to have the ability to finish this race, and it's very exhilarating. And then you tend to pick up your speed a little bit as you finish out the last mile or two. The disclosure activist movement and other movements are somewhat like that. We have been pushing against the truth embargo all these years, and at some point we were going to cross over to a place where it was no longer a question of if and when disclosure was going to happen, but it was absolutely going to happen, and it was just a matter of time, and not a lot of time. I say like crossing the Rubicon. In other words, when did this movement cross the Rubicon? When you couldn't go back. This was an irreversible development, and now it was forward. It was not going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And that was when the To the Stars Academy went public in October of 2017. Put up the website, put up the video announcing their intentions and introducing the people on the To the Stars Academy team. From that moment, we have been heading for disclosure at a pace certainly quicker than it had been prior. Now, I'm quite convinced that the intention when that organization was launched was to move very quickly towards congressional hearings and disclosure in 2017. But that was based on a Clinton victory in the election. When she lost, it changed the circumstances, it changed certainly the agenda, and they had to rethink before actually formally coming out. We sort of knew about them, but they hadn't announced themselves at the point of that election, but we sort of knew something was in the works. We'd gotten enough information, but we didn't know exactly who, we didn't know exactly how it would be structured. So it took them 11 months before they finally decided, okay, we're going to go forward, and they announced in October of 2017. So that is the Rubicon. We crossed it. What that meant was that we entered the final phase, the end game of the disclosure activist movement, the end game of the truth embargo. And in chess, when you get to the end game, suddenly moves can start coming pretty fast. And so that's what's going on. So you have witnesses coming forward in greater numbers than ever because of the work of the TTSA, which includes the unidentified Inside America's UFO investigation on History Channel, which has helped stimulate a lot of witnesses approaching them, mostly military. You've had developments in political and so forth. And one of the most important developments is that the barrier to people coming forward has in fact been lowered. The bar has been lowered. It's easier now for people to do it, and so that's quite significant. So on the other side, to address what you brought up, and let me put this in perspective for your listeners, viewers. Let's be clear. There were people inside the United States government, inside NASA when it was formed, that were fully aware of the extraterrestrial presence, literally as the space program is coming together. And it was embargoed. There was a new, and it was embargoed. They had to go forward with the space program. They had to go forward with a lot of things, but the acknowledgement of the ET presence was not going to be part of that. So they had to, so the inside is dealing with the ET presence just like the citizens are dealing with it, but in two different ways. So what happened was there was a lot of ways that they dealt with this. And eventually, one of the ways was to show the world that they did care, that your government, NASA, whatever, does care about this issue, which is constantly being brought up. We're not idiots. We're not completely oblivious. And they had to show this in a way that managed the issue in order to support the truth embargo itself. The creation of SETI and SETI programs early on was a management program. It wasn't about, let's go find if there's extraterrestrials out there. They already knew there were extraterrestrials out there. They already knew they were engaging us. So the SETI program was designed to be kind of a buffer. In other words, we're looking, so hey, give us some credit here. We're looking. And so don't give us such a hard time about, well, we're not checking out these sightings. We are looking. We do care. So it was basically a buffer. It was basically it was scientific propaganda in order to maintain a certain status on this issue for the government. But there was something else they did. In order to show that, again, they're not oblivious to this phenomenon, it's all over the world and people see it all the time, is they started doing a slow scientific drip process where they would release something that had stimulated your thinking about the ET issue. And they did it slowly, meaning they weren't just going to put anything out they found. They were going to find out stuff and they'd make a decision later. They've known about life, water on Mars for a very long time, but they have, and this is intentional, they have dripped that information out, right? Teased us with it. They've done things like make a big deal out of a Mars meteorite that we knew that was origin was Mars. It was discovered in '97, and it had what could be fossil-like entities in it. And that was a big deal, big announcement, but it didn't go anywhere. And they've been doing this slow drip. It's kind of an indoctrination of sorts. It's also a public relations move on the part of the government, meaning, again, we do care. Otherwise, why would we mention this thing about phosphine gas? Why would we mention water on Mars? Why would we mention about panspermia or organisms existing outside the space station? But what's happened since we crossed the Rubicon, Ben, is that whereas before the TTSA announces in October of 2017, they were doing a slow drip process. After that announcement and subsequent developments, they're in a reverse position. In other words, the disclosure process is now moving very quickly and getting out in front of them. And so they've had to pick up their dripping. They've had to speed up the drip process in order to try to keep up.
Oh, I see. So, yeah, I am. So the announcement of life on Mars and Venus is kind of running parallel to this as part of the I say propaganda that has been going on, leading towards the point where they can actually say these things. Because
the pace is picking up. In other words, the scientific community can't acknorage the ET presence.
Yeah, because no one's talking about SETI now, are they?
Yeah, the scientific community is going to be on the hot seat when the announcement does come. Think about it. The ET presence is finally confirmed by heads of state. And now everybody's going to look at the scientific community and say, well, what did you know and when did you know it? All right, and if you didn't know it, how come? You're the scientific geniuses. And if you did know it, why did you go along with this mass deception? They've got a problem. And so anything they put out to sort of be helpful, is to try to make it a little easier for them. It's public relations. So phosphine gas on Venus, that was a safe one, no problem. Well, Venus, very hot place, though some people think there's civilization down there. I doubt it. It couldn't absolutely prove that it was had a life origin, but they sort of indicated that there was no other way. So they teased us with that. That's good. Water on Mars, even larger quantities. So the question is, what is their next ploy? In other words, what's the next drip in this public relations process? And I have speculated what I would do if I was them, knowing what I think is coming, congressional hearings and ultimately disclosure next year. And I needed to get something out that really showed that we're on your side. Happens to coincide very comfortably with the rover, the new rover called Perseverance, which is on its way to Mars right now, and is going to land in February. Interesting timing. Nice. And so that thing is going to unfold. It has even better cameras. And it's going to start cruising around. And if I was NASA, I would make sure it cruised by something really artificial. Could be a sculpture, could be some symbols in a wall. It could be anything, but it needs to be absolutely conclusive. And boy, they show that photo. Oh my God, it would be huge, no question.
Well, how about Sidonia, where the face on Mars and these other things are? I mean, there's never been a landing near that location.
Yeah, no, this is not landing near there, but it doesn't have to. It just needs to show an artificial structure of any kind, or artificial or an artifact. And so what in that instance, right? There's huge excitement. NASA scores a major triumph, right? Oh wow, they've been pixelating out stuff on photos for decades in order to avoid us seeing that kind of absolute conclusive photo. So, but here it is. And so what they've done is they've confirmed not only that is there life outside the Earth, okay, that's straightforward, but it has to be intelligent life. Otherwise, it couldn't create a sculpture, could it? And so, but at the same time, it's ancient, right? It's been gone for millions, maybe a billion years. So it's safe, but it's powerful and conclusive. Now that's a big drip, right? And that's the one I would put out. I'd put that out in February of next year because. And that would be a huge catch up to on their part to the disclosure process. And then when disclosure takes place, they can say, hey, we showed you, there's been intelligent life on Mars. We showed you the photo. We're on your side. The fact that we have been stifling this stuff for 50 years, well, we had to obey the government's rules and orders, and they had to under the law. So forgive us, please.
Oh, that's going to be a tough sell, but a
little tough.
It will be, yeah. But I mean, obviously, Mars, like life in the past on Mars, intelligent life in the past is something. I mean, there's like I had Nick Redfern on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about how there are photographs now which seem to show certainly some kind of animal life or plant life on the planet, which maybe we'll hear more about that as well. That could be another big drip, as you describe it. Now, there's a lot of other strange things happening. For example, did you watch the debate between Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel about the New York Times? Because I think Dolan had this idea that it fizzled a little bit. The stream of stories had fizzled slightly, and Zabel was saying no, it hadn't, and this was just a pause. What do you think about that?
What happened was pretty straightforward. The TTSA made the decision to go ahead and launch in October of 2017. Now, they could have held off, but they didn't. I'm pretty confident that the reason that they delayed it at all, because I think they plan to go public in October, or rather November, December 2016, was the political situation in the United States literally exploded into chaos. So you didn't have to be a genius to know that, well, after that election, things were going to get pretty chaotic and all-consuming of the media. And so this was, in other words, not stable. And so if you're involved in a project that ultimately is leading to the most profound event in human history, which is the formal acknowledgement of the ET presence, you want a relatively stable environment in your own country, at least, not political chaos. And so they didn't make their move. but they eventually did. Now, why they finally did, I don't know. It may be they felt that waiting any longer would be problematic, that there were issues. I don't know the calculations, but they ultimately go ahead and they announce. And things, not surprisingly, take off very fast. You've got the New York Times articles, which generated an enormous amount of press. The TTSA in general was getting a lot of press. On my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org. I'm approaching 600 articles, mainstream press articles about the TTSA, related projects of theirs, as well as evidence they put forward, all connected, related, 600 articles, huge amount of coverage. Witnesses started coming forward. The Unidentified Show in History launched. That generated all kinds of contacts coming to them. I think DeLonge mentioned a number as big as 1,500 approaches from people, many of which were military people going, hey, I've got a story. And then you had news items. So it was picking up speed, but the problem is that the political crisis in America didn't diminish, it kept growing. It never stopped getting worse. And so ultimately, they slowed down. As we move forward, and they saw the potential for things to maybe settle down, get corrected, and this chaos to be, it returned to some normalcy, they essentially backed away. And so the Unidentified series ended. There hasn't been a third one, and may never be a third one. And their activities dropped off. The article coverage, media coverage dropped off dramatically, and I follow it very closely. And so essentially, they went into sort of a pause, meaning they could have done a lot of things. They could have created more news. They could have been very forceful if they wanted to, but they decided to wait and see what happened politically in the United States. Now, we know what's happened now. We know who the next president's going to be. We know who is going to be in control of the Congress, at least the House next year. Soon, it'll be a while, we're going to know who's in charge of who's going to run the committee chairs in the Senate. And so we're now heading for quiet, calmer seas. And so, yes, there was a substantial slowdown that's been going on for about a year and a half. But that's about to change dramatically. So I agree with Richard on that. Now, but it's not because the issue is less important. It's not because the intention of the TTSA is dropped off. No, ultimate attention. No, it's political circumstance. This is a political issue, and it's heading to resolution, and therefore I anticipate dramatic developments within a couple months.
Right, and there's this new thing. Well, it's not new. It's kind of just a rebranding of the original ATIP, but it's the UAPTF, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force. Now, this apparently is going to release every 6 months an unclassified public report. Is that correct?
That's again part of the how can I put it? It's part of the public relations game that's going on. In other words, as I've said countless times, the government doesn't have a science problem. It has a public relations problem. It's known the truth. It's withheld the truth. The truth is going to come out. How can we maneuver and position ourselves so that the damage is not too great to our institutions and our careers and our legacy and whatever? And so the ATIP program, take that. That was going to come out. So naturally, it was portrayed, even by the principals, as the research program that the Pentagon was doing on the extraterrestrial issue. No, that was a kind of a vanity project of the good man, Senator Harry Reid, who wanted them to do something and wanted something a little bit more accessible. The government of the United States has been studying with enormous intensity the extraterrestrial issue since 1947, relentlessly, massively. We will learn eventually how massive. So what's the ATIP program? It's not the real research program by the U.S. government in ET issue. It is a surface program created, but it's public relations wise, it's comfortable for them to sort of project it as, yeah, that was the program. That was the program studying the ET issue. Nothing else was going on but that. That's ridiculous. Okay, but by by having that come public, by presenting it and bringing it forward, which is what they did. They brought it to the New York Times. I didn't know about it. Not too many. I don't know many of my colleagues that knew about it. So it was, in a sense, kept relatively secret, but it wasn't a deep USAP program. It was kind of accessible. So by bringing that forward, they obviously drew enormous attention to the issue, and they raised the whole issue of the government studying ET phenomena again, because we know that they were, quote, studying it in Project Blue Book, but Project Blue Book wasn't the actual study program.
No, it was a cover-up.
It wasn't a cover-up. It was a public program designed to draw attention of people to their efforts to supposedly get to the bottom of the issue, but it was in front of the massive classified program. Some people call it the secret or the classified Blue Book program. I don't know if it was called Blue Book, but whatever, that was going on all the time. Again, it's a game being played. It's a shell game. It's a public relations game. It's not good government, and it's not what should have been done. That's my opinion. Others would disagree. So there was that. Oh, well, man, they started studying it again. Nevertheless, it raised interest. It attracted attention. And by just raising the idea that the program is, that ET stuff is being studied by a program inside the DoD, gave a lot of credibility to those of us that have been saying, no, they've been studying it all along. And so it's a positive thing, no doubt. Now, when the TTSA made announced their program, they didn't inform all the rest of the government about this. They didn't send emails out to the Air Force and the Navy and the CIA and say, hey, we're about to announce this program. This program was known by a limited number of individuals within the military intelligence complex that were supporting their effort, providing them cover to go forward. But they didn't send out an announcement. And so when the TTSA was announced, let me tell you, there were a lot of people caught, how would you say, brought up short. In the Navy, in the Air Force, in the Marines, in the CIA, all over the place. They're going, oh, what? So, okay, so there had to be sort of a catch-up there. In other words, what are we going to do, right? So that the TTSA comes out with the Nimitz story and the Nimitz gun camera footage, all about the fact that the Navy had this event in 2004 and has been sitting on it for 13 years. And then they had the event in 2014 in Roosevelt on the East Coast, and they sat on that. So the Navy was really embarrassed. Yeah, we've been sitting on this the whole time. We didn't tell anybody. And they're going, wow, that's not good. So the Navy's got a PR problem. And so what do? Well, they started responding. They announced that they were going to modify the protocols for a report by their pilots. Then they announced that they were actually going to start archiving those reports. Then they announced that they confirmed that the gun camera footage from the Navy planes was legit, right? And then the Office of Naval Intelligence, eventually we learned that they set up a UAP task force, right? Meaning, wow, we set up a UAP task force. Just set it up. Sort of implying, wow, I think this is important. We're going to study it. The Navy's been studying this issue for 70 years, all right?
Cool.
And so this task force is public relations, but it helps to start to shape their engagement, right, as we move forward. Everybody wants to look good. Nobody wants to be seen as a lying propagandist or hiding and making everything secret, breaking laws sometimes. Nobody wants that. They all want to be seen as good people, heroes. I get it. I understand that. The politicians are the same way. They're more interested in being seen as a hero than actually doing something that would help the country, right? I get it. But I'm not going to just let that go. I'm going to point this out. Every time I'm in front of a camera, you're going to hear me talking about this, all right? So, in other words, the people need to get to a place where they can't be manipulated by this kind of stuff. Half-truths, dripping processes, front operations. They need to know what's actually going on, when it's going on, so that we can decide what to do about major issues, and I consider the ET issue a major issue.
It's incredibly major, yeah.
Yeah, so the ONI is, fine. I'm glad. So it sort of said, hey, we're paying attention, right? The Army announced that they were doing a cooperative research program with the TTSA. Why did the Army do that? It's not a big deal. Those cooperative things, there's tons of them.
Mhm.
So what was the reason for that? It was the Army's way of showing, hey, we're on board. We think there's something maybe going on here. We don't want to be left out.
So
Now,
it's
the Air
cool
Force
now, isn't it? It's almost like cool to be studying
Yeah.
UFOs, and
We want to
you know,
be cool.
you mentioned SETI earlier on.
Yeah.
It's people stopped talking about it since the Breakthrough Listen project was cancelled.
You
Everyone
bet.
stopped talking about it, and I mean, I think you're absolutely right about SETI. In fact, viewers, if you go to YouTube, you'll find I've done a presentation called SETI and UFOs, which is about this very subject. And Stan Friedman, who I miss very much, as I'm sure you miss him as much as I do. He called it silly effort to investigate, and so that's now gone out the window as if it's no one's really bothered.
Not out the window, but SETI. If I'm SETI, I keep quiet. In other words, there have been a few things that have turned up in the press, very little, and there's been a lot less coming from the esteemed Dr. Shostak. No, if I'm SETI, I keep quiet.
Well, he gets his salary, doesn't he? He gets paid.
Yeah, it gets paid. But look, SETI is going to have a huge public relations problem. And unlike the government, SETI doesn't have, it's really difficult for SETI to cover itself. Right? What can it do? The government can do a lot of things, and they are, to sort of prepare and do some public relations to protect their image post-disclosure. SETI, what can it do? It can suddenly come up with a signal, right? Yeah, we have a signal. We got it. Say it's next month. We found a signal. Here it is. Well, they can only do that. They'd be damn fools if they faked one. So they actually have to have a real signal, and I don't think the ETs are providing them a real signal. And so they basically are sitting ducks. And so when disclosure takes place, a lot of people are going to say, hi, SETI, and its former employees and directors and so forth. Hi, did you know about this ET thing? Have you ever heard of Stan Friedman, Alan Hynek? Have you seen any of the massive evidence that's been accumulating for 70 years? Were you paying attention? And if you did know, why didn't you say something? What's going on here? What about all those millions of dollars you spent looking for signals when the ETs were engaging us on the planet, in our airspace? Did you not figure that out? I mean, look, it's a horrendous public relations problem. If I were SETI, I'd shut down, everybody find another job and just disappear. But it's going to be really brutal for them. And I have told Shostak that, and he just blew it off.
He would. He was in this BBC documentary that I was asked to be in, and I said no way. I saw it. I was very relieved. But the irony is almost unbelievable that they've been staring billions of light years out into space, looking for something which is literally already here with us, and they could be flying saucers above these telescopes, and they just wouldn't see them. It's intensely ironic.
It's offensive to me. It's one of the worst abuses of science by politics ever. There have been a number of them, believe me, particularly as you go back in time, right, when having a valid scientific opinion meant you might get burned at the stake. So, but in terms of the modern era, it's the worst abuse of science. In other words, the whole scientific effort, which was science. Radio telescopy is real science, and radio telescopes do incredible things. And I'm sure that the radio telescope field benefited from a lot of the work done to create these telescopes and use them. But in terms of the fundamental goal, it was a ruse. It was a fraud. And so essentially SETI for decades has been used as a ruse in order to help maintain a truth embargo by the United States government that should have ended by 1992-93. So it got an extra 30 years. And a whole lot of money being spent on what amounts to a front operation. And if anybody from SETI wants to debate that, I'm happy to do it. It will not be comfortable for them. It's a terrible situation, and I don't mean them harm. I don't want them to be disgraced, but they still have time to come forward. They still have time to come forward and say, look, at minimum, we have really been paying attention to what's happened the last 3 years, and we're starting to think that, hey, the ETs are already here, and we regret that our work did not produce evidence of that because they were looking thousands of light years away and not.
They're calling people like me and you. They were calling us names. That's the thing.
Well, there was that. That's diminished a little bit, but yeah, there was a time when they were abusing the people in the field, which I really hated, and I called them out on that.
Well, Carl Sagan was downright rude to Betty and Barney Hill, to various other people. He was downright rude to them.
And Carl's legacy will be forever tainted by his cooperation with the truth embargo, which we may or may not find out the details about. But there's no doubt in my mind he was cooperating with the embargo. I think he felt good reasons. And I think I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I think he felt the politics of it was such that it was the right thing to do, because Sagan was so popular. I mean, he was a scientific rock star. I don't think deGrasse Tyson or Kaku or any others have reached that level. He was a rock star, and it wouldn't have taken many words out of Carl Sagan's mouth to literally set the truth embargo on fire. But he chose not to do that, and that will be a significant aspect of his legacy, which I hope one day will be fully aired and known, and so we can not be guessing about it, because it's history of the highest level. We should know the details.
There could be information out there we don't know about. Could be information, but what you described is, of course, it's a very deliberate and controlled process. Although sometimes it's in chaotic times, you'll find that things sometimes emerge in an uncontrolled way. For example, President Trump, and I know you've got a very low opinion of him, but he's currently launched a lawsuit against his own government because he believes the election was conducted wrongfully. Now,
again, that's all part of the political chaos.
Yeah,
but it's been nothing but chaos, and so you just lump it all together. The specifics don't much matter. What matters is, what was the government of the United States stable over the last almost 4 years? No, it was not. And so a lot of things didn't happen because of that. In other words, if a hurricane just came through Louisiana, and so when the hurricane arrives in Louisiana, there's a whole bunch of things you're not going to do. You're not going to go outside and water the lawn. You're not going to go down to the baseball park and hit some balls. You're not going to. There's a whole lot of things. You're not going to hold meetings. And so until that hurricane passes, you have to bunker up. The pandemic is kind of another example of that.
Yeah.
The pandemic is destabilizing. And so for 3 years, we had a very destable government. And then for the last almost a year, we've had an unstable government, and a pandemic as well. And so there's a list of things that aren't happening that ought to be happening. Now, that will change soon, and we'll get back to more of a standard normal operation. Now, I'm not saying that there won't be changes. I'm not saying there won't be even dramatic events. Hopefully, a lot of reform of politics and government, but it will be much more stable than now. And that is what you have to have if you're going to make the biggest political maneuver of all time. It's political and scientific, right? You're going to finally end this truth embargo. You're going to hold hearings in front of multiple committees with scores of military witnesses, which are going to invite hundreds of millions of people to watch this testimony under oath, penalty of perjury, to members of Congress of multiple committees, leading to eventually the disclosure of the issue. You want as stable a situation as you can have. And so I think that's what we're about to do next year.
That'd be ideal, wouldn't it? Because I mean, if for example, supposing Trump decided to pull an ace out of his sleeve and say, here's the UFO evidence I've got. I've been briefed on this. I lied to George Stephanopoulos. I lied to my son about Roswell. Here is everything. I mean, would it be ignored? Would it be laughed at? What would happen if he did that? If he tried a trick like that?
It's a slim hypothetical. I don't even want to. It's not worth investing time in.
Okay.
It's a hypothetical and highly, highly unlikely.
Right.
I mean, what would happen if Putin were to do it? I mean, a much more appropriate thing to consider is Putin or Xi Jinping, but certainly Putin. What would happen if Putin did it? I assure you, that would be dramatic and significant and would have very important geopolitical consequences. And I've always thought it could happen. And I've said it could happen. I've said it countless times on interviews that, dear Pentagon, do you understand that Vladimir Putin could disclose ET presence anytime? So think about that while you continue to keep the truth embargo going in order to avoid the political and public relations problems that you fear your public relations problems will be even bigger if Putin makes that move. Now, he chose not to do that.
So far,
now,
I mean, so far.
And
I mean,
so
he
far,
did.
but it's also
He talked about it.
there's a story out that he may be having health issues. He may
Yeah, I
be
saw
may
that.
have Parkinson's disease, and so there's a rumor he might step down. Now, if I'm Putin and I'm about to finally leave power after having quite a run, I might make that a parting gift to myself on the way out the door. And so again, I'm much more concerned that Putin will make a move before we proceed with the hearings and ultimately with disclosure. But if it comes from Putin, I can live with that, and we'll follow quickly with our own announcement, and we'll be in the post-disclosure world and get on with civilization.
Well, as we talked before, I mean, it's one thing. Once it happens, that's it. It'll just explode outwards. I mean, we talked before about President Putin. Of course, is a very long-served statesman. I mean, he's been is it 25 years or something? He's been president of Russia, and his deputy Dmitry Medvedev has kind of like hinted. I think he said something once where it's almost like he was being overheard, but he knew someone was there, and he made a comment about UFOs.
It's a famous event years ago, kind of a breadcrumb thrown out, maybe. Again, I can't emphasize, every government in the world that has significant military capability, and that means defense, Air Force. We have a defensive Air Force, France, Canada, all the countries that have these who defend their airspace by intercepting bogeys and so forth. Every one of those countries is aware of the extraterrestrial presence and has evidence of it, minimal from gun camera footage, every one. And so again, the truth embargo is a non-trivial thing. It doesn't just involve the United States. It involves scores of other countries who, for various reasons, have gone along with this embargo.
Because most nations have the capability with air defense radar, Air Force, like you said. Yeah,
of course. So, I mean, again, some people say, well, until I actually see gun camera footage from France, I will assume they didn't know anything. I mean, look, when you're dealing with secret programs and classified information and disinformation, misinformation, you don't have the luxury of saying, hey, I need to show me the actual real evidence until I form a conclusion. No, you have to look at the totality of the evidence and come to reasonable conclusions until such time as the government provides hard, clear, broad information. Then you can say, okay, this is what it was, this is what's going on. But it's like going into a trial and being a defendant, and so you're trying to defend yourself against against the prosecuting attorneys, and they come up to you and say and ask you questions and say, look, I can't tell you, it's secret.
Yeah.
And we're like, where were you that night? No, I can't. It's a secret. It's classified, and so that you don't give any testimony, and so the prosecution can only guess based upon other information that maybe what went on. No, you'd be convicted. Right? And so that's the problem we're in. The government will not tell the truth. We have to sort of assess it as best we can. That's what we're left with. Now, we've done a hell of a job. We've amassed massive evidence, and we've come to, I think, some very good assessments based upon just reading between the lines. And now the dots are getting closer together, and we're connecting more of them. But and yet, until the government announces the extraterrestrial presence, anyone can say, Steve, you're just guessing. You don't know. You'll never know. You don't have the evidence, whatever. I get it. But that's not the way activists work. We have a goal. We know where we're going. We use the information we have. We make the assessments we have. We tell people and ask them to make up their own mind until we get what we want.
Yeah. I've got another good example of like this chain reaction we were talking about earlier of different people, starting with David Fravor, the pilot, and other people. There's Captain David Fruhoff, who actually used to fly. He was with the CIA and flew with the U.S. Air Force, and he flew the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane. Now, he started saying that Bob Lazar was telling the truth. Have you heard about this?
I may have heard about that. But look, this gets back to something that I can't emphasize enough. If you want to say what's the number one most important thing that Louis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon and the rest of the To the Stars Academy people have done, is that they have crossed the Rubicon on this issue, and they have done what was necessary to finally lower the bar for the thousands of military witnesses, thousands of them, that have worked on this issue, either in government or possibly in defense contractors, to come forward without any fear of retribution. So when David Fravor comes forward and fully backs up that gun camera footage and nothing happens to him, a lot of witnesses that have not come forward watch that and go, oh. And then another witness comes forward and nothing happens to them. Nothing's happened to Luis Elizondo. Nothing's happened to Chris Mellon. These guys had major security clearances. They were right up there at the top, and they're out doing all this stuff. Have they been attacked?
No.
Have they been attacked politically? Has the Department of Defense impugned them? No. And so you've got thousands of people all over the world, not only in our country, but other countries, are going, hey, I guess we crossed the Rubicon. I guess, hey, we're now headed towards the disclosure, and I can finally speak after all these years. And so they're calling up the To the Stars Academy phone line by the hundreds, I believe, saying, I've got a story, and they're accumulating these stories. And some of them they put on their unidentified show. So as you go through the 14 episodes, you keep seeing newer witnesses, all military, though, with very few exceptions, which is where the emphasis needs to be initially.
Because military
can't imagine how many more military witnesses are going to come out between now and next February. Probably hundreds more.
Yeah, it could be any number, because of course, military pilots are the people most likely to have these experiences. But sure. What Fravor and the others have experienced is something that's been reported since time immemorial. I mean, there's Parvez Jafari, Milton Torres. I mean, you go back to 1942 and the Foo Fighters sightings. Essentially, these people have been essentially reporting the same thing, and it's never been taken seriously until now. And that is a
story.
Yeah, is a Rubicon
story about Milton Torres. And this highlights what I'm trying to say very well. Milton Torres was a fine American. He served in the military. He was a pilot, and he was assigned to the UK. So he's operating out of the UK, one of our bases there, either an American base or a UK base that was sharing its space with our Air Force. And he was sent out. This is quite a while ago. I forget the year.
1957.
57, that could be. And so he sent out to intercept a bogey over the channel. And so he gets out there, and as he's closing in on it, because there's a lot of fog. No, this is the English Channel, and so he's seeing it through the radar. He hasn't got visual yet, and he's eventually told by the base, shoot at it, shoot it down. We're worried about it, whatever. And obviously that got his attention. He was very excited and concerned. Wow, I mean, that's very rare, extremely rare for an intercept program, a pilot chasing down a bogey to be asked to shoot it down without confirmation of what it is.
In peacetime, certainly, yeah.
As he approached it, though, his radar indicated it was the size of an aircraft carrier. So now he's really concerned. But before he could get into a position to either have visual or launch any weapons, this aircraft carrier flew away at great speed. Okay. And so Milton goes back to the base, very relieved. I think he probably then went to the officers' club and had a couple of drinks and went home, went to bed, and he went up the next morning. There were some guys in suits ready, wanting to talk to him. And they basically told him, you can never, ever talk about this to anybody, or there will be severe consequences. And so Milton, for the rest of his life, we're talking decades and decades, he didn't tell his wife, he didn't tell his kids, he didn't tell anybody, went on to have a fine career, became a professor, a teacher down in Florida, South Florida. But when, at some point, he got outed. He got outed because some documents were released as part of, the ongoing disclosure process. Some documents got released out of the UK. I forget who was involved. Might have been Nick Pope, but whatever. Might have been Redfern, could have been Good, but whatever. Some documents got released that were declassified that actually discussed and outed that story about what happened to him, his actual story and his name. And so, wow. And so the press finally found him and wanted to talk about it. And so Milton, with some reluctance, agreed, and he came forward with his story. Now, when I learned about this, very, very quickly after I learned about this, I immediately invited him to an X conference. I forget which one. It might have been 7, could have been 8.
I've seen the video. I can't remember, but I've seen the video.
And so I immediately invited him to the X conference to come and tell his story as a witness. I invited his son. and he agreed to come. His health was not good. His son needed to be there to help him. And so he came, and he spoke at the X conference in Washington, D.C. about his story. And when he presented to the public, he broke down and cried. And I'm starting to get teared up.
I did too.
He cried because he was so emotionally relieved that he could finally tell his sons, and I think his wife might have still been alive, about this extraordinary thing that happened to him. And he was no longer under this burden of like, you can't talk about that or there will be severe consequences. How many thousands of American military personnel have been told over the last 70 years, you speak about that and your career is over. This will happen to you. That'll happen to you. Right? I can't even imagine how many. And so he broke down and cried. And then I had a press conference afterwards, and this was the big press conference. This was 9, I think. Might have been 10. Anyway, so it was held in a fairly large, one of the large rooms of the National Press Club, and we had the CNN was there and a number of entities, and he got up and again talked about his story with the press covering him in Washington at the National Press Club, 2 blocks from Washington, and he broke down again. Okay, now,
I remember.
Let us compare that to what has been happening since the New York Times story broke. You've got pilots after pilots coming forward. You've got radar operators coming forward. You've got crewmen from the Roosevelt coming forward, right? That were also told, you can't talk about this. And nothing is happening to them. And I haven't seen any of them break down and cry. So Milton came out before we crossed the Rubicon. These guys are coming out after the Rubicon. But not just guys, there's also some women coming forward. Why? Because the bar has been lowered. The game is basically over. And while there will be people that will stay silent to their grave, there will be a flood of military witnesses emerging, and that is what, and of course, which means that they will be available for hearings. It's national security based, and the hearings will take place, and it will be national security based hearings, multiple committees, and there will be pretty much nothing but military witnesses testifying under oath, which will basically end the truth embargo, meaning it will create a situation where the president can make the announcement. Eventually, I hope, particularly if disclosure takes place, that they will broaden the hearings and start bringing in the civilians, the researchers, my colleagues, and others who have been working on this long before the TTS showed up, and get their views and thoughts and learn what they have uncovered, and thus create a link between the government engagement and the popular engagement, civilian engagement. And I look forward to that. I hope it happens. But the military is the key, and national security is the basis. It is a legitimate issue, and always has been, for every appropriate committee in Congress. The idea that, oh, there's no national security implications to the ET president, so why do we need a hearing? Nonsense. So that's the way it'll start off, but it will then morph into a much broader and more, I think, appropriate engagement by the Congress and ultimately by the American people.
Yeah, I think it'll be quite something when that happens. It will happen eventually, definitely. So tell us about Disclosure Wire, Steve. Is that up and running yet?
Disclosure Wire, I deliberately held off on it. I wanted to wait until there was some political resolution, and I didn't want to get too out in front of my skis. But I'm about to start it. I'll do an introductory video in my studio here, where you see me now, and I'll put it out everywhere. It'll be all over the place. I have a YouTube channel. I've got the Twitter and Facebook, and there'll be other platforms, and I'll get it out there. It's free. There's no restrictions. People can reproduce it at will, and that will be the launch. And then I will start producing podcasts. Initially, it'll be just me, but hopefully in time I'll be able to do some guests, probably on Zoom, and then hopefully I'll have some guests in studio. So it's about to start. I know it's been a long wait, but what timing wasn't right. So that's going to happen. Disclosure Wire podcast. I do have a domain, disclosurewire.org, and I have a YouTube channel, Disclosure Wire, a YouTube channel. So there'll be multiple places you can find it. It'll get going. It'll be a podcast. It's not going to be spectacular, but it's going to be relatively high-level, professionally produced. Everybody's got a podcast now. I'm not going to try to become a star or anything. I'm not going to.
It does seem that way.
It does seem
like a lot of people do. Obviously, I do, but you know, it's a community. It'd be great to welcome you to that community of people like who broadcast, because you appear on other people's shows. It'd be great for you to have your own show too, Stephen. Yeah,
everybody else has a podcast. Where am I? You know,
exactly. I mean, I'll certainly become one of your listeners, no doubt, definitely, and I'm sure many other people will. But so, if people want to find out more about you, is the website still active?
Oh, of course, no,
the same website.
Plenty active. That's been. I'm constantly adding new information. ParadigmResearchGroup.org, or Google my name, Stephen Bassett. And as I always do, I want to point out that there are certain key resources there that, if you really want to get on top of this issue quickly, you can find them at my website. And the Print Media Archive, which is under Resources, the Resources tab, is an archive of mainstream media coverage of the ET issue, going back, well, all the way to 47, but most of the articles that are archived are in the last 13, 14 years. I'm approaching 12,000 articles, I think, or 11,000 articles that are archived and linked. You can go read them. You can spend weeks reading how the media has covered this issue. You'd be surprised how much they've covered and how much information is there. So that's a huge resource. 600 of those articles relate to the TTSA's activities and developments that have emerged because of the TTSA. 600. Now, again, we're not talking frivolous fringe stuff. We're talking mainstream media press. And there's about 400 articles about the Clinton campaign and all of the ET-connected media coverage of that. So that's 1,000 articles there. And then I have another section under issues regarding the TTSA, and it's a media section. So I've got about 160 videos of news coverage of the TTSA, interviews of TTSA members, presentations that they've made, 160. So you can really get a sense of what's going on. And of course, there's much more about the TTSA than that. Mellon's got a Twitter page now. Go read them all. Go read everything he's tweeted. So does Elizondo. A lot of the little nuggets, a lot of the little, a lot of breadcrumbs are being dropped by them on Twitter, and so forth. So these are resources I commend to people. ParadigmResearchGroup.org.
Check it out. Especially if you're new to the subject, you might want to look at the resources tab that Steve mentioned. And so, Steve, it's been good to talk to you again. It's been a year, and who knows? In a year's time, things may be very different. I think they probably will be very different in one way or another. And it'd be great to get you back on the show, and we can recap over what's happened. But great to see you again, mate.
I'd love to be able to go in a time machine and go jump to October of 2021. My projection right now that I'll be talking about is that hearings will start early in the Biden administration, very early. There's reasons for that. And if they do, say they get started in mid to late February, they will go on for weeks. And I think disclosure will almost certainly follow. If you have like a single hearing like we had in '68, which was essentially a kind of it was a legitimate hearing, but it was kind of for show in a way. One hearing, one day, that's it. We're out of here. No, if it was like that, no, but that's not what's going to happen. We're talking multiple committees, multiple hearings, military witnesses. It won't take long before the president will be in a position to comfortably confirm the ET presence based upon, if not just the evidence emerging out of the hearings under oath. You see, that's a safe and comfortable way to do this, and appropriate and minimally disruptive. So if I'm right, and again, I may not be, hearings in February, March, disclosure end of March, early April, and that will be one hell of a launch to the new administration. I think most people, regardless of their political persuasion, would agree to that. One hell of a start to the 46th president.
Well, definitely. I mean, if I was the president in his position, I mean, that's the first thing I would do, definitely. So who knows? Maybe straight after his inauguration, and he's had his dinner, that he'll go and sign executive orders. And
not that soon. But if you're a president facing the problems that he is facing and his administration is facing, massive, massive problems, you need all the political capital you can get.
Of course, but if in that situation, I mean, like you said earlier, existing problems could be made easier just by solving this one you've described many times.
But in a very pragmatic sense, a president facing massive problems needs all the political capital. And obviously, a successful end to the truth embargo by the Congress, right, which will hold the hearings, by the president, who ultimately make the confirmation announcement, provides, and not just to the president, but to the Congress and both parties, because one of the reasons congressional hearings are so important is that both parties will be involved. They'll all be taking the testimony and asking questions, and there will be a massive audience. I can't even imagine how big the audience will be. And so everyone is accruing prestige and political capital from this, but certainly the president gets the lion's share. And then that political capital can be used to get things done. That is why, if anybody asks me, Steve, do you think we should hold the hearings right away or wait a couple of years and see how things are going? I say, no, you get those witnesses in as quick as you can. You get those hearings going and you get disclosure done. And then you can use all of the enormous excitement that will generate to try to move forward and make some and govern. But again, I'm just a peon here in the press building. Nobody cares in Washington what I think, but that is so powerfully logical that I'm willing to keep
waited long enough.
I'm saying that's what they're going to do.
We've waited long enough. I mean, it's time to just get it done, like I said. But
yes,
if that happens, I mean, I'll cross the Atlantic. I'll come and see it myself. I'd love to be there. So fingers crossed, mate. Fingers crossed.
Oh, of course you're going to come. And I'll tell you something else. If they hold those hearings, now again, we're talking February next year. The pandemic will still be kicking, but they will probably allow some people in those hearings. I will move heaven and earth to get in those hearing rooms, including spending a lot of money I really don't have to have line sitters. You pay people to stand in line, right, way in advance so that you can get a place and get in there, because if they're going to have those hearings, I'm going to try to be in as many as possible sitting in the audience. And I'll do everything I can to get in the front row.
You can't sit. You can't stand in every. You can't stand in every queue, can you, Steve? But,
so here's David Fravor testifying before a Senate committee, and people are watching it, and they're kind of looking. Is that Bassett sitting behind him?
Oh man, definitely, you got to do that. I mean, I watched the Citizen hearing in 2013. I watched it online. I watched it religiously every day because of the shift work I was on. It started just when I got home from work on my early shift. It was fantastic, but nothing like being there. I've got nothing like being there. So
this will be the real deal, my friend. This will be a once in a lifetime. You'll never forget moment, equivalent to the biggest moments in all of human history. We've waited a long time. We've earned this.
Yes.
And the American people are ready for this. Believe me, if you've gone through this pandemic, if you've gone through the political chaos of the last 4 years, you need something really exciting and positive to get going again. And it's going to take more than the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. That's right.
Or the World Cup or whatever.
Oh, definitely. Those will pale into significance. Yeah. I mean, it'd be great. That would be. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm right behind you on there, Steve. So fingers crossed.
Thanks,
and hopefully that'll work out. But
you look good, my friend. And
thanks.
Hang in there. Stay safe. And maybe the next time we do an interview, there will be a real flying saucer behind you instead of
you never know, mate. You never know.
All right.
Fingers crossed. But you take care. Remember, everyone, buy this book, Roswell Rising. It's only a story, but it might come true. So check those out as well, and also
hold that up a little longer, Ben. You moved it too much. You hold that up for a while. Hold it.
All right, yeah.
Let people see it. Okay, now you can take it down.
Yeah, it's only a story. There's 2 sequels as well, and it's only a story.
Don't be shy.
It's only a sequel, but it's only, like I say, it's only a story, but it's basically a story I wrote based on the possibilities that Steve and I discuss in our interviews. So
sure.
Definitely, so you may find it useful. I hope you do. And of course, check out Steve's website and Disclosure Wire when it comes along. Make sure you go and listen to that and watch the videos and listen to the podcast. But so it's good to see you again, Steve. It really is. And I feel hopeful talking to you as always. And I wish you all the best of luck and stay in touch. Hopefully we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
And so that was Stephen Bassett. brilliant guy. I absolutely love him. I think he's brilliant, and I think he's excellent. I really do hope that he can achieve what he wants to achieve. Now, as you know, there's always been I've had some disagreements with Steve, like, as I've explained before, and as we've discussed before, I have a much more rosy view of the role that President Trump plays in this process. Steve essentially, I think, has written him off. I haven't. I've done videos about this in this series before, and I still think that, as I explained in there to Steve, I mean, Steve and I went through all the issues I raised in the Exopolitical news section, but Steve, I don't think takes this seriously. He didn't. He says it's so unlikely it's not worth contemplating. I'd love to prove him wrong on that if, in this chaotic situation with the election or non-election, the president might decide to play the ultimate ace out of his sleeve. And let's face it, if he did decide, if it was all looking bad, if the courts were corrupted and they weren't going to prosecute people for committing electoral fraud and things like that, it is possible that President Trump might say, okay, let's just tell everyone about aliens and be done with it. I don't know if that's possible. You see, Steve, like I say, sees this as a very controlled, smooth, uninterrupted kind of flow. I see it as something much more tortuous, much more turbulent, much more unpredictable. As you know, if you read Roswell Rising and its sequels, it describes a disclosure process which is far rockier, far more uncertain than the one Steve envisaged. We shall see. Like I said, I mean, whenever I speak to Steve, I think, you know, these two, because there's internal conflict as well. I don't just disagree with Steve. There's a part of me which disagrees with the other part, which means that sometimes there's a part of me that thinks, yes, it can be done. And whenever I speak to Steve, I always find myself harnessed to his dream. But then there's another part to myself that comes forward and says, no, society cannot possibly have a disclosure of that particular type. In other words, a controlled, willing disclosure. It's not possible. There's another part of myself that says, no, Ben, it's not possible. And these two forces within myself kind of battle each other out, against each other. I've explained this many times in my videos. And obviously you know which part I want to be right. You know which part I want to be true. I'd love to be proven wrong on this. I would love for the hearings that Steve talks about to happen soon. Because if that happens, of course, that'd be brilliant. And I will go there. I'll paddle across the Atlantic in a canoe if I have to. I'll bloody go there, I'll tell you. And I'll report for Panwo TV, of course, on that situation. But, you know, I mean, as far as President Trump and what he could achieve in terms of alien UFO disclosure in the next couple of months, as the forces that are in collision over this election and the suspicious elements associated with it battle each other out in the courts. This could be exactly, not an October surprise, but maybe a December or January surprise that he needs to maintain control of the situation. And just, if Trump is the disclosure president, just imagine the look on Steve Bassett's face. Oh, I'm sure Steve will be delighted no matter how it happens, but I'll tell you what, it'll be such a surprise for him. It'll be quite amazing things to see. Anyway, I mean, I will probably be discussing that again in another episode of this series, UFO Disclosure 2020. And I'll go into more details about it then, and perhaps connected with the series I've done on the election and its fraud and things like that. Who knows? As I said before in previous videos, you literally cannot make a prediction. Everything is so new, everything is so fresh, everything is so without precedent that nobody, literally nobody, can know what's going to happen. All we know is that something will, because every cause has an effect, and right now we've got a lot of causes. We've got a huge number of causes. I mean, there's like people. The skeptics keep going, "Oh, where's the smoking gun then? Where's the smoking gun? Where is it? Where is it?" Well, there are plenty of smoking guns now. There are smoking guns all over the UFO world. I mean, there's a smoking gun here, there's a smoking gun there. I mean, it's as if ufology is turning into a Sergio Leone film. I mean, what more do you want? The skeptics are raising the bar, but they can only raise it so much further. And what's more, the mainstream media are going to have to deal with this, and politics are going to have to deal with this. Now, President Trump has proven himself to be one of the most innovative and original presidents the United States has ever seen. Now, but this would take the biscuit even by his standards, but I don't think he's above it. I really don't. And I remain hopeful. And so should you. Thank you all for watching Hapanwo TV. There'll be another video coming very soon. Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.